but he's influenced my coaching after I've seen him at a conference some time ago. So Ric Charlesworth is a doctor of medicine with an honorary science degree and an arts degree majoring in philosophy and history. He's a former captain of the Australian hockey team and the Western Australian state hockey team and cricket team. He was also elected a member of federal parliament in 1983 and retired 10 years later. His plans to pursue medicine were diverted when he took on the position of the national coach of the Australian women's hockey team from 1993 to 2000. Between 2009 and 14, he coached the men's team as well. He is the author of 5 books on coaching and team management, in 4 World Cups and 3 Olympic Games as coach of the Australia Charlesworth's team won gold on 6 occasions and once won bronze as well. They won 8 of 9 Champions Trophy tournaments and 2 Commonwealth Games Gold medal. This is a record never equal in the sport. Between 94 and 2014, Charlesworth was Coach of the Year, guys, 8 times. So it's my privilege, my awesome privilege to welcome Ric Charlesworth as our next speaker, and he's going to talk about 5 coaching lessons. Ric, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. And I'll share my my screen with you guys. I hope it can start now. Can we see it?
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm doing my best.
There you go. I think it's coming.
How are we going?
Yeah. Got it.
And I've given this talk a few times, but there are 15 lessons, and so I've had to distill it down into 5, and so I've come to these 5 things which I wanted to talk about. But interestingly, when I think about the previous speakers, the lessons are generic; they're not technical. And indeed, Wayne and James made the same points, you know. And for me, the real critical advantage that you have in sport is not in sports science; it's in human behavior. And so I suppose that'll be the direction of the sorts of things I'm going to say. And I might say the other thing is that I think that in 14 years coaching the national team, both men and women, I never met a player yet who knew how good they could be. And my task as a coach was to lift the bar, to challenge them, to take them to places where they couldn't go or they didn't believe they could go. And I think that of all of the jobs that I've done in my life, the most satisfying was coaching. So to all of you out there who are in coaching, then I think this is a really rewarding job because you're helping other people realize their potential. So here's the 5 lessons. Yeah. You concentrate on quality. Leadership's important and it's for everybody. You never compromise. You always have to think it through. Sometimes you're tempted. You've got to get the culture right, and candor is critical. You've got to say what you think. You've got to stand for something, and you've got to be believable. So if I go to those things, then your responsibility as a coach is to make it fun and interesting. And if you do that, then the athletes will learn and they'll come back and they'll want to be there. And I think Wayne made the point very strongly that the only athlete who doesn't learn is the one who's not there. You better know what you want and you better stand for it. But I've put at the end of that little sentence, until. And normally, if it's interactive, I might ask the audience, but I have to answer my own questions in this environment. And the until is until, you know, something better comes along, or you discover a better way, or there's you have to be also capable of changing and growing and developing. And of course, the point I wanted to make as strongly as possible was that you have to insist on quality. You know, if you don't stand for quality, if you don't exemplify quality in what you do, then the athletes will find shortcuts and ways around that. So I think quality is critical. Here's, for those of you who are in baseball, a little story. This comes from The Art of Fielding, a novel I read maybe 6 or 7 years ago now. But baseball was an art, but to excel at it, you had to become a machine. It didn't matter how beautifully you performed sometimes, what you did on your best day, how many spectacular plays you made. You weren't a painter or a writer. You didn't work in private and discard your mistakes. And it wasn't just your masterpieces that counted. What mattered, as for any machine, was repeatability. Moments of inspiration were nothing compared with the elimination of error. And we spend our time looking for reproducible skill under pressure. And we want to produce that in our players, and we create environments of training where we can get that. And, you know, the last sentence, if you can't make that throw 100 times out of 100, then it better be 99. And we have to insist on that sort of quality. We have to look for that sort of performance if we want to be outstanding. So leadership, for me, it's for everybody. And perhaps one of the most interesting things I did in my time as a coach was develop leadership groups larger than was previously the case. I always thought that the captaincy was a bit of an anachronism in sport, something out of its time. And indeed, I wanted to create an environment in which everybody had influence, everybody's opinions mattered, and you avoided social loafing, and you created an environment in which there was all opinions were accepted and could be taken into account. And the thing that we were looking for, right at the end there, I mentioned it, conscious interlocking individuality. If your team's going to be successful, then and in team sport, what you're trying to do is be unpredictable to the other team, but predictable to your own team. And the connections between one another, knowing one another really well, allows you to do that. You still want individuals to be special in their own way, but they have to do it in the context of the team. And so it's a mouthful, but conscious interlocking individuality is something that you're looking for. And leadership, this is a little bit of the Harvard Business School work of leadership. Followers want comfort, stability, and solutions from their leaders, but that's babysitting. Real leaders ask hard questions, knock people out of their comfort zones, then they manage the resulting distress. And I really think that's something that you have to look very closely at. You have to be willing to disturb people, to create an environment in which they are challenged and they are taken away from being comfortable if you want to make change. Number 3 was never compromise, think it through. This is a picture taken from my worst day as a coach, a semi-final in London against Germany. And you can see there on the screen, we're leading 1-0. It's just 9 minutes before half time. We had a corner, we had to defend it, and the goalkeeper was responsible for making the call, and he made a bad call, and the other players didn't challenge it. After the game, when I asked them why not, they said, oh, we thought it was wrong, but we didn't want to upset him. And I think what it pointed to me, and when we looked at what happened, what went wrong in London, then our culture wasn't as strong as I thought it was, and we let ourselves down that day by not challenging one another on the field. You know, we spent a lot of time after London trying to improve that, to make it better. And a little quote here from probably Australia's greatest track athlete, Herb Elliott, undefeated in the 1500 meters and the mile over his career. Champion understands that small compromises that are evident only to them are not small compromises at all. They are a decision to concede on championship and to slip back to the field. And I think it underpins the compromise issue. You have to take you have to be willing to always look at what you're doing and to expect exceptional performance. I'm going to show you a little video now. This is from a game maybe 5 or 6 years ago in Antwerp, Australia versus Belgium. And normally, again, I would ask the group to talk about it, but it's the fourth quarter, as you can see, and the score's 0-0. So it's a close game. There's 3 minutes to play, and it's an important juncture in the game. And I'll just put it on, and then I'll talk a little bit about it.
Touch to play in Orchard. Kavanagh.
I hope it's playing.
Swan now. Stephen stepped up into that right pocket. Swan spotted the gap, goes on the tomahawk, and there's the cross in. Orchard's going to have a chance here outside the post. Oh, good goal! They score! Kieran Govers scores, but automatically the Belgian team have run away to Raghu Prasad to ask for the video referral. I'll go for your foot. Your foot. Oh, thanks, Kieran.
Well, Kieran Govers has just admitted that he kicked it. What an unbelievable bit of sportsmanship. He stuck his hand and said, you know what, I kicked this. Before it goes into the D, it's come off a body. He's already said, before it goes in, that there's a foot. That's exceptional sportsmanship at this level of competition.
And normally I would say to the audience, well, why would you do that? You know, and people come up with all sorts of answers. They say, well, it's the right thing to do, or, you know, there would have been a video referral and they would have sorted it out in the end. Sometimes, of course, the video referral doesn't get it right. But the thing that I'm really looking for, and why this is of interest to me as a coach, is we used to discuss this situation in our team. And my view was that I want this because what we are saying to each other is that there are no shortcuts. In this situation, we don't take something we didn't earn. And if you have that ethos in your team, if the players believe in it, and indeed, not all of the players in the team believed in it, but when we discussed it over time, there was a consensus that this is what we should do in this circumstances. You never, never, never cheat. And it was about having an attitude which said there are no shortcuts. We don't want to win by any other way but by our own merit. Photograph here of two doctors, but the quote is important. If your culture's right, then you're always looking for an advantage. This is a question you have to ask yourself regularly. What might seem impossible and unlikely, but would make a big difference if we did it? We used to ask ourselves that question all the time. The two guys in the photo, one of them I went through medical school with, and in 2006, they won the Nobel Prize because they came up with an idea in 1980 that ulcers were caused by bacteria in your stomach and not by acid penetrating the stomach wall. Nobody believed them for 20 years or more. And eventually they won the Nobel Prize because they were right and everybody else was wrong. You've got to ask yourself counterintuitive questions about how you can do things better. And I think it's an important question. If your culture's right, then they're seeking, searching, looking for improvement. And finally, you know, number 5 is candor. This is a famous photograph from football of Zinedine Zidane. And this is a quote from him. This is from Real Madrid 2006. In 2006, Real Madrid finished 26 points off the top of the league. They had a really terrible season. And this is a quote from Zinedine about the season. The problem this season was that there were too many strong personalities in the dressing room. We didn't communicate properly because we were too afraid of upsetting one another. And in life and in families and in businesses, people don't say what they think. And if you're really going to have a team which is connected, then you have to be willing to speak and say what you think. And I think it's really important. In my opinion, there's no strong personalities in their dressing room, because had there been, then they would have got with the coach and said, we're not playing well. How are we going to fix it? What are we going to do to improve it? They would have been interacting with one another rather than picking up the money, but playing poorly. And it's really a critical thing you have to do. And this quote here goes to it. Think about your own experience. Can you remember receiving really blistering feedback from someone at some point in your life? And in this instance, you didn't become defensive, because normally we do. When we're criticized, we become defensive, fight or flight. Instead, you absorb the feedback, you reflected on it, you allowed it to influence you. If you ask yourself why, it's because you believe the other person had your best interest in mind and you respected their opinions. And as a coach, that's the person you have to become. You have to become the person who's respected for their opinions, but who the players believe has their best interest at heart. If you can find yourself in that space, then you're in a space where you'll find that the athletes, you have a relationship with the athletes, which is an honest one, which is which seeks out conflict, handles problems, and deals with the stresses and the concerns they have. And you have to have these sorts of conversation. Actually, things aren't quite like that. When you do that, it hurts the team. How are you going to change it? What do you think is your greatest weakness? You have to be willing to go to those places in your discussions with the athletes. Sometimes, of course, you might be saying, well, when you do that, that's fantastic, but how about this? There are other ways to do it, but you have to be willing to go to that space if you want to have real candor in your team. And that's the end for me. I think maybe there's a couple of minutes left. You would know better, Andre.
Yes, and we have time for a question, Rick, if you don't mind. You mentioned
Sure.
earlier social loafing, and the question is, can you define what social loafing is?
Yeah, well, I think if I get a group of people together and I appoint somebody as the leader or the captain, and then I ask them to do a task, then I think what you find is that they wait for the person who's the leader or appointed as the leader to find the solution. This is why I, over a period of time, didn't believe that we needed one captain. We needed a critical mass of leaders and captains in our team. And so I want everybody to be involved in finding the solution to the problem. I want every player in my team to be thinking like a captain, thinking about strategically, thinking critically, being curious, looking for solutions, and interacting with one another. If you can create that sort of environment, then I think you've got everybody contributing, and that's what you're looking for.
Rick, thank you very much. I know I'm reading the chat. I'm getting a message also. We could listen to you for a full day, as I did before, and really enjoyed every time I heard you speak. I thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's only 20 minutes, but if you go to the chat box and if you want to contact Rick or to get his book, I highly recommend you read the book. He doesn't only have one, but he's got a couple ones that you could be interested. Rick, thanks so much. Much appreciated. Good luck with everything, and we hope our paths will cross again in the future.
Thank you.
Wayne, off to you.
Andre,